Welcome back to The Work.
The Work.
The Work.
Thank you again for joining us, and talk soon.
So, what was the origin of The Work? What goals did you have in mind by getting these conversations together?
I think initially Bradley and I had talked about kind of just wanting to have like more in-depth conversations with filmmakers. I mean, we've both been like used to seeing, a lot of panels that kind of only scratch the surface as far as like these discussions go. And, like Bradley and I had been friends for a while, but we never talked specifically too much about our own filmmaking processes. So like this was kind of initially just an excuse to get like our friends together and kind of pick their brains.
Sure.
But then we thought, it would be of good interest to everyone else. And personally, like I think there's a lot of benefit to hearing just other people speak the same language as you in the kind of like nonchalant, kind of open, candid way.
It did start as a kind of informal conversation between Curtis and myself. And obviously with quarantine going on, there wasn't a lot going on. Things that have been kind of like rattling around in our individual heads, we wanted to voice them out loud and kind of talk to one another in the film community to see if there was more of a conversation to be had.
Now that the first season's kind of gotten off the ground, what are you hearing the most about filmmaking in Chicago? Do you think it can lead to some significant change at all?
I mean, people are still like plugging away, and despite COVID and stuff like that. I mean, I hope that it like has allowed more time for reflection and development and emphasis on story development, which leads ultimately to better work. And once we're all like able to actually shoot normally again.
Curtis and I are just two guys in a huge community of working artists, and the way we've tried to position the work is just a conduit for conversation to be had. We don't like view ourselves as authorities or anything. We're just two people that had this one idea and got it rolling, and we're hoping that other people will come on board and make it instead of just a two-person thing, a community thing and a network thing.
Very cool. One of the fascinating things about the series to me is you've broken it down into themes. What makes these themes different, do you think, because they're coming from Chicago filmmakers?
Personally, I kind of like hope that a lot of the themes that we discuss are universal outside of the city. I think those are universal things, but sure. They are contextualized still within the city, I think.
Very good. Bradley?
We're definitely Chicago filmmakers, but I think everybody's sort of defining that for themselves. And so the approach that we've taken is just to deal with people on a more individual level,
right,
and interrogate them about their own particular process. So maybe in a way that is a Chicago thing, because people can take a more individualized indie spirit and say, okay, this is the Curtis way of making a film, or this is the Bradley way of making a film. And that's a little bit more accepted.
So there is a pretty extensive infrastructure that is developed for Chicago filmmaking. Do you believe there is a missing X factor that could make it better or make it all come together?
Money being invested into each of our films.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Well,
the first factor is someone giving me a lot of money to fix everything. But it's 1,000 cuts. It's like there's always going to be something missing, and we're never gonna reach that 100% perfect filmmaking setting or scenario. So like we can go to panels about line producing or film festivals or whatever all day, but if we're not also balancing that out with like talks about how to develop characters and story structure and things like that, we're just kind of treading waters. So it still has to be treated like an art form. It still has to be worked on continuously.
Final questions, guys. Which films set in Chicago are your favorites in the sense of how Chicago, in quotes, they are, or how they best show off the city?
I don't know how well it represents Chicago, but I always think about like The Untouchables as just one of my favorite Chicago movies. And when you emphasize the Chicago-ness, if to use the cliche kind of term, if the city is a character in the movie, right?
Right.
Like what is that character saying? I think that, just putting a scene in front of the bean doesn't really add much to your movie, unless it's
Bradley?
As a native North Carolinian, I don't know if I feel qualified to state what is the most Chicago films, and maybe that's the thing that we're pushing towards. What will be the definitive Chicago sort of aesthetic, and what type of film will be able to better define Chicago as a city? Maybe it's asking ourselves, in what ways can we make films different than any other place? We do that as a unit, as a community, we'll have something there that will be a Chicago film. And it won't be represented by the Bean or something ridiculous like that.
Finish us up, Curtis. Why don't you give us a big plug for this thing? Tell people where they can find it. Start with the title and go from there.
Go to facebook.com/theworkchicago or our YouTube page, which is The Work Chicago. And we'll be releasing more of the videos throughout the month of February, and ending the month with a kind of live group discussion of all the participants.
This is Patrick McDonald for HollywoodChicago.com. Copyright 2021.